What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be taking a deep dive into each of the main card fights taking place this weekend at UFC Fight Night Dvalishvili versus Yan from a betting perspective, apart from the fight between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann, as I already broke that fight down a couple of weeks ago when that matchup was originally scheduled to headline another Fight Night card. So if you want to watch my breakdown video for the Krylov versus Spann matchup, just go to my YouTube channel page and you'll find the breakdown here. So not much has changed since that fight was originally scheduled, so check it out. So I hope that you're going to be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions, maybe even earn some extra cash. And if you like these breakdown videos and you get a lot of value out of them, you can watch breakdown videos for all the prelim matchups on this card over on my website, MMABettingTips.com. There's a link for that in the description below. So the exact kind of breakdowns you get for the main card fights here on YouTube, you can get for the prelim fights over on my website. So if that interests you, please check it out. And if you are placing bets this weekend, if you are, taking on board the information I'm sharing with you in this video, please remember to do your own research and gamble responsibly. It is brutally difficult to make money betting on sports, and the information that I'm going to be sharing with you today is backed up by hours and hours and hours of research and over a decade of experience. But at the end of the day, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. These are just my opinions. I'm just sharing with you, what I've found from watching recent fights from all of the fighters that we're going to be talking about in today's video. But ultimately, very difficult to make money betting on sports, so please do your own research. So before we get into the breakdowns, also want to let you guys know this will be of particular interest to you if you are a member of my community over on MMABettingTips.com. But one of our own, FrozenThrone, long-time member, very active member of the community, he actually has an MMA fight this weekend, Saturday night, just before the UFC starts. FrozenThrone's real name is Josh Hood, so he'll be fighting this weekend. He hasn't gone pro yet, he's still competing as an amateur, but obviously within the community we've watched all his recent fights. Josh is very well rounded, very skilled, and I'm looking forward to watching him this weekend. So I thought I would let you guys know that in my community you can also watch Josh this weekend. And if you want to support Josh, you can buy access to watch his fight via live stream. And if you use his code just circled here, which I'll leave in the link, I'll leave the link in the description below with his code. But if you use that code, you also get 10% off the cost of the live stream. But it's also really important to use that code because all of the fighters competing on this Battle Arena MMA card will have like their sales tracked for how many pay-per-views they sell, and the fighter that sells the most pay-per-views will get a cash bonus. So let's give Josh some love, some support this weekend. Let's give him a push. Let's try and sell as many of these pay-per-views as possible. So this weekend, what I'm really asking for is, if you enjoy my videos, if you get any value out of them at all, this weekend, do me a favor, go support Josh, buy the live stream, buy the pay-per-view, and go and support a young, hungry, talented, up-and-coming MMA fighter this weekend. I'm certainly going to be buying this live stream and watching the fight, and I hope you will join me. So I'll leave a link for that in the description below, but don't forget to use the promo code so that the promoters know that that sale came from Josh. So let's all support Josh this weekend. FrozenThrone in our community, great guy, and drops great knowledge, real positive influence on the community. So let's support him, man, and hopefully he wins his fight. He's told me there's been some shenanigans in the run up to this fight. So he had an opponent switch a couple of weeks ago, the weight class has also changed, so there's been some shenanigans to try and throw Josh off his game. But we've all watched his past fights. We know how well-rounded he is. We know how tricky a stylistic opponent he is for anyone at the level that he's fighting at. And, great cardio, tough as nails, moves well, solid takedown defense, tricky striking. I'm sure Josh is going to get the job done this weekend. So good luck to you, Josh, mate. So, with that being said, it's time to jump into the very first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be the main event between Dvalishvili and Peter Yan. And I also want to use this as an opportunity to apologize for these breakdown videos coming out later than usual this week. But when you get late breakdown videos, trust me, it's always a sign that we have got a brilliant card to look forward to. Because whenever breakdown videos come out later in the week from me, that's almost always a sign that the card is taking longer to research than usual. And the reason why a card would take longer to research than usual is almost always going to be we've just got more interest in more complex fights. So even though it sucks that breakdown videos come out later in the week, the benefit of that is you know that when they do drop, hopefully you're going to get a lot of value out of them because the information I'm going to be sharing. But on top of that, the reason why they're coming out late is because the fights are brilliant. And, you know, a card like this is very different from the cards we've had in recent weeks, because literally top to bottom, we've got interesting, competitive, complex fights from the very bottom of the card to the very top. Whereas in recent weeks, we've had so many matchups which were quick and easy to research because it was blatantly obvious that, you know, the fights were going to be very one-sided or end very quickly. They didn't really require a lot of deep analysis because, you know, if you're researching a fight like Tatiana Suarez against Montana De La Rosa or Bo Nickel versus Jamie Pickett, it's not going to take you very long to research fights like that because, you know, after just 20-30 minutes of watching footage on both fighters, you're going to see very clearly what the strengths and weaknesses of both fighters are and how one-sided those fights are likely to be. Whereas when you're researching a fight such as, you know, Jonathan Martinez versus Said Nurmagomedov, there's a lot more to think about and a lot more to analyze. So it takes longer to work through these fights, and as a result, breakdown videos just naturally take longer to get out. But better late than never, and I hope that the quality of the information I'm going to be sharing with you guys will be worth the wait. And we kick things off with, in my opinion, the best main event of the year so far, next to Glover versus Jamal Hill. This fight is an absolute banger from a stylistic point of view, and such an interesting fight. Two bantamweights at the absolute top of their game, in their absolute prime. Cannot wait for this one this weekend, and it is a real interesting matchup. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Peter Yan is a pretty big favourite at odds of around 1.38, which is going to be minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. And we can also see that his odds have been steadily declining since they were first released, you know, at around 1.60. And despite the fact that Yan has opened as a pretty steep favourite, his odds have just continued to decline. So even though he's a big favourite and he's facing a very tough opponent in Dvalishvili, people continue to bet him and bet his odds down. Now in contrast, Dvalishvili's odds are around an average of, call it 3.10, which is going to be plus 110 for an implied probability of 32%. So this is one of those matchups where you've got to respect how good Dvalishvili is. You know, he's got great cardio, he's tough as nails, he fights at a relentless pace, he's reasonably good everywhere. And so you've got to respect the fact that he's tough enough and well-rounded enough to make this fight interesting and make this fight very competitive. Having said that, when you look at how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, I don't see how Dvalishvili wins. It is a brutally difficult stylistic matchup for him. And as much as I hate betting on big favourites in MMA, and I will not be betting Peter Yan this weekend, I can understand why Peter Yan is a big favourite in this fight. Because as good as Dvalishvili is, he doesn't really have a path to victory, because Peter Yan is very good at neutralising the things that Dvalishvili does best. And we'll get into the specifics of what I mean by that, so that hopefully you guys can, you know, make a decision on what you're going to do in terms of betting this fight, and make a good decision, because I've seen a lot of people, online talk about the fact they're going to bet Dvalishvili this weekend, and I kind of get it, because he's very good and he's a decent sized underdog. But I think people are looking at how good Dvalishvili is, looking at the odds and thinking, oh, you know what, Dvalishvili's undervalued here, I'm just going to roll the dice on him. And then maybe not perhaps thinking about the strengths and weaknesses of both guys, and sitting back and going, well, hang on a minute, Dvalishvili is very good, but how's he actually going to win? And that's really what we're going to be focusing on in this breakdown. So Dvalishvili's 32 years old, 5'6" with a 68-inch reach, and Yan, 30 years old, 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. So we're all familiar with these two guys, and we know it's a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Yan is an elite striker, Dvalishvili is an elite grappler. So the winner of this fight is going to be the guy that can keep the fight in the area they have the advantage for longest, right? So we know the longer the fight stays standing, the more it favours Yan, the more likely it is Yan wins. The more the fight's on the ground, the more it favours Dvalishvili, the more likely Dvalishvili wins. And when you look at Yan, it can't be denied that, he's run into a little bit of trouble with grapplers. Aljamain Sterling was able to, nick a split decision win against him by trapping him in some really bad positions on the ground. And we know Aljamain Sterling, Merab Dvalishvili are training partners. So, Dvalishvili is pretty much in the best training camp in the world to prepare for a fight with Peter Yan, because his friend, his direct training partner, has already beaten him, right? Sterling's camp has written the blueprint on how to beat Peter Yan. And what's actually interesting about Dvalishvili and Sterling is that I actually think Dvalishvili is a better grappler than Sterling. Certainly for MMA at least, because we know Sterling's weakness is that the more he grapples, the faster he slows down. So while Sterling is an incredible grappler with crushing grappling control, a vicious, nasty, devastating submission game, like I say, incredible physicality and grappling control, the problem with Sterling is that physicality and that explosiveness and that athleticism comes at a cost, where we know the more Sterling grapples, the faster he slows down. So Sterling's not one of these guys that can grapple hard for 25 minutes without slowing down a lot. Dvalishvili's different. Dvalishvili may not have the physicality, the athleticism, the crushing grappling control that Sterling has, but Dvalishvili is one of these guys that can push an insane pace and grapple hard for 25 minutes without slowing. And I really like that about Dvalishvili, and that's why, I think Dvalishvili, for most guys in the division, is a more difficult test than Sterling, because when it comes to Sterling, if you just neutralize his grappling early on, he becomes far easier to deal with later on in the fight. That's not the case with Dvalishvili. He's going to be able to bring it hard in the 5th round, just like he can in the 1st. That's very, very difficult for a lot of guys to deal with. But styles make fights, and what's interesting about Peter Yan is that I actually think, even though Dvalishvili is a tougher test over 5 rounds for most guys in the division, with how these two fighters match up stylistically, I think Sterling is a worse matchup for Yan than Dvalishvili is, because of the slight differences between Sterling's grappling and Dvalishvili's grappling. So let me get into that in more detail. So what makes this such a tough fight for Dvalishvili is that he can't really do to Peter Yan what Aljamain Sterling did. So if you go back and watch the Sterling versus Yan fight, the most recent one, what you'll notice is, for the most part, Yan does a really good job of defending takedowns, scrambling back up to his feet, and neutralizing the threat of Aljamain's wrestling. But Aljamain has got really long limbs, a nasty submission grappling game, and crushing grappling control. So when Sorry, the camera's gone a little bit blurry. Let's fix this up. There we go. There we go. Sorry, guys. It's going to stay blurry, right? God damn it. Sorry about this, guys. Will it focus? Yes, there we go. So, when you look at Sterling, he's got crushing grappling control. So, once he obtains a dominant position, it's very, very difficult to shake him off. And what we saw with Aljamain in the most recent fight against Yan is Yan did a really, really good job of defending himself. But as soon as Aljamain obtained a dominant position, because he's got that crushing grappling control, Yan was trapped in those back control positions and he just couldn't escape because of how good Aljamain's grappling control is. But Dvalishvili isn't that kind of grappler. Dvalishvili doesn't have the same physicality or same crushing grappling control that Sterling has. Because it's always a trade-off, right? You look at a guy like Sterling. He's got physicality, power, athleticism, crushing grappling control, but he doesn't have the cardio to enable him to fight like that for the full 25 minutes. Dvalishvili can go hard and grapple hard for 25 minutes because he doesn't have that crushing grappling control and that huge physicality to everything that he does. He doesn't have those big muscles that burn out like Aljamain does. So the problem with this fight for Dvalishvili is he's probably not going to have that much success with his grappling because he lacks the physicality to overwhelm Yan and trap him in bad positions in the same way that Sterling did. We'll see Dvalishvili shoot really nice takedowns. He will chain wrestle very effectively. You know, he'll be absolutely relentless with his grappling. But the problem is, he doesn't have the physicality to drag Yan to the ground and put him in bad positions because Yan's defensive wrestling is very good. And because Yan's gas tank is so good as well, Dvalishvili's not going to be able to wear him down with his grappling in the same way that he wears down other guys. So, even though I love Dvalishvili, I love his chain wrestling, his relentless style of grappling, I just don't think is well positioned to cause Yan many problems, really, because we know that effective striking, damage are primary scoring factors in MMA, and we know that MMA grappling should only score high if you put your opponent in really bad positions or threaten submissions. And I don't think Dvalishvili is going to be able to do that. I think Dvalishvili can grind on Yan against the cage. I think he can hit takedowns. I think he can, out-hustle Peter Yan with grappling. But I just don't think Dvalishvili's got the crushing grappling control to trap Yan on the ground and keep him in bad positions for very long, because Yan's very difficult to control. He's very, very good at working through bad positions and quickly popping back up to his feet, and Dvalishvili doesn't have that crushing grappling control, the ability to get to Yan's back like Sterling does. I mean, maybe he does, right? Maybe Dvalishvili will come in with a new set of tricks that we haven't seen from him before, but at least based on past performances, I don't feel like Dvalishvili can do what Sterling did, which is interesting because Dvalishvili for most guys is going to be a far more formidable challenge with the pace that he fights at. And if the fight stays standing, we know that Yan has got a huge advantage because Dvalishvili doesn't have the best striking defense, isn't particularly dangerous offensively. He doesn't read his opponents particularly well. We've seen him get rocked, dropped, wobbled a few times in his past fights. So this is one of those matchups where, even though I love Dvalishvili, and I really don't have many bad things to say about him, I think he's a brilliant fighter, I just think that styles make fights, and this is a really, really bad stylistic matchup for Dvalishvili, because I just don't see how he's going to be able to score points with his grappling. He can get takedowns, but realistically, how many points is he going to score if Yan just immediately pops back up to his feet? And we know if the fight stays standing, Dvalishvili is going to get lit up bad. So this is one of those matchups where I hate to bet big favourites in MMA, and I certainly wouldn't bet Peter Yan in this fight because, I respect Dvalishvili far too much to bet Petr Yan in an implied probability odds range of 70%. However, if you really want to bet this fight for action, just to make watching the fight more fun, I think you've got to take Petr Yan in some way. I would really be very surprised if Yan were to lose this fight. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Yan's going to go out there, have it all his own way, be really comfortable, totally dominate. I think Dvalishvili's tough enough and well-rounded enough to make this competitive and make this a war. I just don't see how he's going to be able to win 3 out of these 5 rounds, and it's obviously very unlikely he's going to be able to finish Yan with how tough and well-rounded Yan is. So I hope you found that useful, but let me know what you think in the comments below. I know a lot of guys are on Dvalishvili this week, so let me know, man. I do not want to take anything away from Dvalishvili. I think he's brilliant. I just think styles make fights, and this is a brutally difficult fight for him, stylistically. So, if we look at the over-under on this matchup, we can see the odds on the fight to go to a decision are quite steep, big favourite odds, which you'd expect with how tough and well-rounded both these guys are. I would be surprised if there were a finish. I think it's more likely the fight goes the distance. However, with how bad Dvalishvili is defensively, with how dangerous Yan can be on the feet, just purely value hunting, if you really want to take the over-under on this fight, the under probably gives you the better risk to reward ratio at dog odds, just because the odds for me are far too steep on this fight to go to a decision. But I certainly wouldn't be betting that. I think the odds are probably where they should be. In terms of prop bets, the one that immediately jumps out to me would be Petr Yan to win by decision, but the odds are way too steep for me to consider betting that. The odds on that are absolutely dreadful. Nothing else is that interesting to me on a prop betting point of view, so props a bit dead on that fight. I would probably give that one a miss. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the co-main event, which is another really interesting fight between Alexander Volkov and Alexander Romanov. And we've just talked in depth about a classic striker versus grappler matchup between Dvalishvili and Petr Yan. We got another one here between Romanov and Volkov, and the same kind of rationale for betting this fight applies, where we know that if the fight is on the ground, it heavily favours Romanov. If the fight stays standing, heavily favours Volkov. So from a betting point of view, we need to assess which fighter is going to be able to get the fight and keep the fight in their area of dominance for longer, because we know, if Romanov can get the fight to the ground, keep the fight on the ground, he's going to win a very high percentage of the time. And if Volkov can keep the fight standing, he's going to win the fight a very high percentage of the time. So let's take a look at the odds on this one. We can see that Romanov is the favourite at average odds of around 1.65, which is going to be minus 154 for an implied probability of 61%. If we take a look at the odds on Volkov, he's around an average of 2.30, which is going to be plus 130 for an implied probability of 43%. So Volkov is 34 years old, 6'7" with an 80-inch reach, and Alexander Romanov, 32 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. So we can see both guys roughly the same age, but like with most fights that Volkov has in the UFC, does have a decent size and reach advantage. He's quite a bit taller than Romanov, also has a 5-inch reach advantage. However, like we were talking about with Jalin Turner last weekend in his fight against Mateusz Gamrot, the problem with long, tall fighters, guys that are abnormally long and tall for their division, and at 6'7", Volkov certainly ticks that box. Problem with guys like this is they usually have very weak lower bodies, and as a result are usually very easy to take down and hold down. Now, we did see improvements from Jalin Turner last weekend in his ability to work his way back up to his feet, but it still wasn't enough to stop a very tired Gamrot from getting him down. And Volkov could have exactly the same problem this weekend against Romanov, and in many ways this fight between Volkov and Romanov is very similar to Gamrot and Turner from last weekend, because Romanov is a very strong offensive wrestler, just like Mateusz Gamrot. But just like Mateusz Gamrot, Romanov also slows down a lot the more he grapples, and he also slows down a lot the longer the fight goes. And so Romanov's grappling is really effective early on, but the longer the fight goes, his grappling becomes significantly less effective. And just like Jalin Turner, Volkov is one of these guys that is pretty good at defending himself on the ground. He's a reasonably good grappler, but because he's got a very weak base, he's very easy to take down and relatively easy to hold down as well. So very similar stylistic matchup for Turner, between Turner and Gamrot. And as a result, it's a difficult fight to bet because you can't feel confident betting on Volkov this weekend because of how bad his takedown defense is and how weak he is off his back. But you also can't feel confident betting on Romanov because you know if he starts to become too tired to get the fight to the ground, Volkov has very good cardio for a heavyweight, and we know Volkov will put it on him on the feet, put him under a lot of pressure, outwork him on the feet, and, you know, more than likely stop him with how bad Romanov is defensively when he gets tired. So what I want to do for this matchup is just show you a little clip of just how bad Volkov's takedown defense is, so that you can kind of see why betting this fight is so difficult. Now, I'm going to show you this clip, and then the fair use copyright laws, I should be able to do this, but we know the YouTube copyright algorithm can be very aggressive, so I may have to blur this footage out if this video gets flagged for copyright. If it does, you can watch the unedited version over on my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link for that in the description below. We should be alright though, because I just want to literally show you less than a minute's worth of footage here, and under fair use we should be good. So I just want to show you how bad Volkov's takedown defense is. This is his fight against Aspinall, and what you'll find with Volkov is that he's one of these guys, very much like Jalin Turner, that because he's big and tall and clunky and slow, and very slow to react to his opponent, he gets caught flat-footed a lot. So watch this. So Aspinall comes forward, gets the body lock, and easily hits an outside trip. Look at how easily Aspinall goes down there. And now from this position you can say, well, Volkov has given up a very weak takedown, but he's not in a terrible position because he's been taken down right up against the cage, and, you know, if he knows how, he can use that cage to wall walk back up to his feet. But not only is Volkov very easy to take down, but we also know that Volkov very, very weak off his back. So now we can see he just kind of lays on his back, doesn't make any attempt to, you know, pivot to his right and try to get his back tight to the cage. He actually starts to push off the cage with his feet, which moves him further away from the cage, which makes it even harder for him to work his way back up to his feet. So it's kind of crazy that a guy like Volkov, with over 40 pro fights, who's consistently been, you know, floating around that top 15 in the heavyweight division since I can remember, it's kind of crazy that a guy this experienced still doesn't know how to use the cage as a tool to pop back up to his feet. And so he just kind of lies on his back, lets Aspinall do whatever he wants to him off his back, and will skip through. Eventually I think Aspinall just lets him back up. Yeah, he starts working for a Kimura, and then Aspinall just literally just lets him back up. When he realises he's not going to get the Kimura, like, Aspinall just stands back up there. And then they're back in kickboxing range. We'll skip ahead to a few moments time when we'll see another takedown. Here we go. So look at how easily he gets caught with this takedown. So Aspinall this time shoots a double leg. Watch this, double leg, and Volkov just goes down so easily. And again, very, very weak off his back. Just very, very weak off his back. And eventually you can see Aspinall reaches for the left arm, gets a straight arm bar, which is a submission you very rarely see in the UFC. In fact, I can't recall the last time I saw a submission like that. So Volkov's takedown defense, extremely bad, very weak off his back. And, you know, we know that in round one, there's literally nothing Volkov is going to be able to do to stop Romanov from taking him down and doing exactly what Aspinall did to him. Because Romanov is just as good of an offensive wrestler as Aspinall, and he's also a pretty dangerous submission grappler as well. If you look at his record, you know, plenty of plenty of submission wins on his record. We know he also likes ground and pound, although Volkov's a tough fucker. There won't be easy to stop Volkov with ground and pound. So with how bad Volkov is on the ground, with how easy he is to take down, I cannot bet Volkov here. Those red flags are too big. It would just be foolish to bet Volkov after seeing what I've shown you, knowing he's facing a strong wrestler like Romanov. But the problem with Romanov is, after sort of 6 or 7 minutes into a fight, he is absolutely gassed out of his mind. He hasn't got the energy to shoot takedowns anymore. He's very sloppy and bad defensively on the feet. And we know Volkov over 3 rounds is a cardio machine for a heavyweight. You know, he can really put a high pace on Romanov and cause him a lot of problems on the feet. So you can't really trust Romanov either, because you know if Volkov does survive that first sort of 6 or 7 minutes, he's going to be in a strong position to take over in the second half of the fight and give Romanov absolute hell. So for me, this is a very, very difficult fight for betting. Gun to my head, my lean is Romanov, simply because I think he could take Volkov down early in the same way Aspinall did and get a quick submission with how weak Volkov is off his back. I could also see a situation where Romanov lands a takedown early in round 2 before he's really, really tired, and then spends the rest of the round in top position because of how weak Volkov is off his back, and then Romanov would only need to survive in round 3. So Romanov is my pick here. He's my lean, but you know, I'm not going to bet this guy because I can't feel confident betting on a guy at favourite odds that is going to gas out after 6 or 7 minutes. Just wouldn't make me feel good. So let me know what you think in the comments below about that one. It's a very interesting fight. I think it's one of those fights very difficult to feel confident on either side. Now, in terms of the over-under on this fight, I wouldn't bet the over-under on this one personally, just because of how vulnerable Volkov is on the ground, but also how tough he is, right? You don't know if he's going to get submitted quickly or weather the early storm and drag Romanov into deep waters. I feel it could go either way. If you were going to bet the over-under on this one, just for some action to make watching the fight more interesting, I'd probably go with over 1.5 rounds, just on the basis that Volkov has a pretty good chance of being tough enough to survive that long. And on top of that, Romanov probably won't be so tired after 7.5 minutes to the point where he can't defend himself on the feet. So I think over 1.5 rounds, probably the best over-under on that matchup, but it's not something I'm going to be betting personally. Now, in terms of the props on this one, you can see the odds on Romanov by submission are quite steep. What I would go for on a fight like this is I would actually go for a long shot bet. I would take Volkov to win in round 3. Odds of, well, I don't know what the odds are, because they range from 7.0 plus 600 to 18.0 plus 1700, 16.0 plus 1500. But look, Volkov to win in round 3 should be a big dog odds. I like that, because I think if Volkov can survive till the 3rd round, I think Romanov will likely be too tired to take him down, and then Romanov will be in a lot of trouble, because Volkov will be walking him down, putting a lot of pressure on him, lighting him up with his combinations and his volume punches, and I think Volkov could get a late stoppage. So Volkov round 3, I like that prop a lot. I'll probably be betting that one myself this weekend. I don't bet many props, but I will take that one. High risk gamble, not super likely to win, but when you're placing bets at odds like that, you don't need many of them to win to grind out a long-term profit, because the risk to reward ratio is so good, right? The payoff is so huge. So I hope you found that breakdown video very useful. Now let's break down the next fight between Austin Lingo and Ricardo Ramos. And again, I'm out of focus. Very, very annoying. Let me get back in focus. Shall I just give up and just carry on talking about the fights? There we go, back in focus. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, so let's see. Ricardo Ramos is the favourite at average odds of around 1.27, which is going to be minus 370 for an implied probability of 79%. We take a look at the odds on Mr. Lingo. He is around an average of, it's quite a big odds spread on this. We will call it 4.0, which is going to be plus 300 for an implied probability of 25%. So Austin Lingo is 28 years old, 5'10" with 70-inch reach, and Ricardo Ramos, 27 years old, 5'9" with a 72-inch reach. So this is a very interesting matchup. You can see both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. There's no real notable X factors to talk about there. But this is an interesting matchup because you've got two very contrasting styles, where when you look at Ricardo Ramos from a technical point of view, he probably is better than Austin Lingo everywhere. We know he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's got reasonably good MMA grappling, reasonably technical striking as well. And Austin Lingo is one of these industrious, blue-collar, gritty, grindy, tough as nails workhorses who isn't particularly good at anything, but he's not particularly bad at anything either. He can hold his own everywhere, and he's just a gritty, grindy, tough as nails dude that thrives in chaos and will be in your face for the full 15 minutes. And that makes this an interesting fight because historically those are the kind of guys that Ricardo Ramos has struggled against a little bit. Ramos is at his best when he is able to be the hammer in fights, when he can chip away at you on the feet with his flashy dynamic striking, and when he can take you down and put you in bad positions on the ground. Ramos struggles against guys who can offer up some resistance and take the fight to him. Guys that will walk him down, punch him in the face, try to take him down, scramble back up to their feet, you know, when they get taken down. And Lingo really is that guy. We also know Lingo has got major power. You look at his nickname, Lights Out. Now, we haven't really seen the power materialize in the UFC yet. You can see all three of his fights in the UFC have gone to a decision. But prior to coming to the UFC, this guy would absolutely death shot guys. He would starch them. You know, he had a few viral knockouts, and he hits very, very hard. Like I say, haven't really seen it in the UFC yet. Doesn't mean we won't see it this weekend. So this is one of those fights where, from a stylistic point of view, Ramos does have the edge in this fight. However, Austin Lingo, if he can make this a mean, nasty, you know, war of attrition where he forces Ramos to exert a lot of energy early on and he can turn it into a bit of a war, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ramos fade around about the midway point of this fight and Lingo start to take over, because Lingo thrives in wars. We saw in Lingo's last fight against Luis Saldana, he struggled very, very bad early on against a flashy, dynamic striker like Saldana, but he kept the pressure up, kept putting it on Saldana, wore Saldana down to the point where he could take over in the second half of the fight. And I could definitely see that happening again here. The real problem for Lingo in this matchup is that he's not great off his back. So if Ramos were to hit some takedowns early on, he may be able to rack up some top control, run the clock down, score some points, wear Lingo out a bit, and pace himself better. But this is an interesting matchup, and I do think Lingo is one of the more live underdogs on this card. So I haven't decided whether I'm betting this fight yet. It's one of those matchups that I've only just researched, so I need to sleep on it and, you know, think about this fight a little bit more deeply. But I do think this is one of those matchups where the odds are possibly a bit off, and Lingo is a tempting bet. This is definitely dog or pass. You would have to be out of your mind to bet a guy like Ricardo Ramos in a fight like this at these odds. You would literally have to be out of your goddamn mind. Please do not bet Ramos this weekend. He might make it look easy, he might win, whatever, but you're putting your money in a lot of danger betting a guy like Ramos in a fight like this at an implied probability of 79% is ludicrous. So this is definitely dog or pass. But I haven't decided if I'm betting it yet. I will, of course, if you remember my website, I will let you guys know via Telegram if I decide to bet him. But yeah, I'm still not sure about this one. I might have to research it a second time before I make my mind up. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, I do like the over 1.5 rounds. I will probably be betting that myself at odds of 1.65. I think that's very good value. I haven't bet it myself yet, but I will probably take a stab on that. I do like over 1.5 rounds in this fight, just because Lingo's tough as nails. It's not going to be easy to get him out of there. And, you know, Ramos will probably do pretty well early on, I would imagine. In terms of prop bets, again, I'm not a big fan of props. I don't really bet props very often. You know, max bet limits on props and stuff aren't great. I don't take them that seriously. You guys know me. My bread and butter is live betting football and live betting the UFC. And as a result, props are just not something I'm that interested in. But with how dangerous Lingo was prior to coming to the UFC, with how aggressive he is, with the fact that Ramos does have a habit of caving from time to time when put in bad positions. We can see both Nurmagomedov and Murphy were able to stop him with strikes. The odds on Lingo to win by knockout or TKO 8.0 plus 700, they seem a bit wide as well. So if I was going to bet a prop on this fight, I would go with Lingo to win by knockout or TKO. There's probably a bit of value there. And yeah, I quite like that. I think there's value there. Obviously not going to win a super high percentage of the time. But again, when you're betting things in that odds range and taking calculated gambles, you don't need to win many bets over the long term to make a profit, right? You don't need to have a particularly high win rate. So that's another prop I quite like on this fight. So hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the next fight on the card, which in my opinion is one of the most interesting fights on this entire card. It is Jonathan Martinez against Said Nurmagomedov. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Nurmagomedov is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.41, which is minus 244 for an implied probability of 71%. We take a look at the odds on his opponent Martinez. He's around an average of 3.05, which is plus 205 for an implied probability of 33%. So we've got two extremely skilled, extremely talented, up-and-coming fighters in the bantamweight division. Great matchmaking, great stylistic matchup, very, very complex fight, and a fight that I'm very much looking forward to this weekend. What I will say about this matchup is that it is a very common phenomenon in MMA where random bullshit that doesn't mean very much can often have an influence in the odds, such as when Antonina Shevchenko first came to the UFC. She was a massive favourite in most of her early fights because her sister was Valentina Shevchenko. It had nothing to do with Antonina's skills, just people assumed Antonina Shevchenko would be great because she's sisters with Valentina Shevchenko, right? And I do feel that Said Nurmagomedov's connections to Khabib and his surname has an influence on the odds in his fights when he doesn't necessarily have the skills to back up the odds that have been set on him. After researching this matchup, the odds on this fight just don't make any sense to me at all, and I feel they should be far closer than they actually are. For that reason, I will be betting Jonathan Martinez as a big underdog this weekend for reasons that I will explain in this video. But I also want to use this as an opportunity to let you guys know that whenever you bet on a fighter in the odds range that Martinez is in, he ain't going to win a really high percentage of the time. Because if Martinez had enough big advantages over Nurmagomedov in this fight to win comfortably a high percentage of the time, he wouldn't be this big of an underdog. And I want to make this point because it drives me crazy when I put a YouTube video every week and I get guys in the comments who will like berate me and make fun of me for betting fighters in this odds range like 2 years ago that lost. And it's like, my friend, do you not understand the game that we're playing? The game that we're playing is to try and find strong positions to put our money. We're trying to find situations where the odds are stacked in our favour and we're getting a very favourable risk to reward ratio. If you're betting someone at odds of 3.05 plus 205, those odds by their very nature imply that that fighter is going to lose a decent percentage of the time. But just because they lose a decent percentage of the time doesn't mean you can't make money betting fighters like this over the long run. Someone left a comment on last week's YouTube video where they were like, oh, ha ha ha, remember like 2 years ago when you bet a guy at odds of 3.0 and he got destroyed? Like, you were totally wrong about that fight. And I'm like, mate, like what, like actually what planet do you live on? Do you understand the game we're playing here? If Martinez goes out there on Saturday night, gets taken down and guillotined in 20 seconds, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't change the fact that based on past performances, these odds are off and there's a good margin of value on Martinez. Does it mean he'll win this weekend? No, it fucking doesn't. Does it mean this fight will be competitive this weekend? No, it fucking doesn't. Does it mean I'm a total dum-dum that doesn't understand how to analyse fights if Martinez loses this weekend? No, it doesn't. All it means is that on Saturday night, Nurmagomedov got the job done, irrespective of what past performances showed. So what I would say about a fight like this is, if you are going to bet Martinez this weekend, please do your own research and understand it is a very tough fight for him. Nurmagomedov is no joke, and this is likely to be a very, very tough fight for Martinez. If it wasn't, he wouldn't be a big underdog. On the flip side, Martinez is also no joke. And this is probably not going to be a particularly easy fight for Nurmagomedov either. There are a lot of things Martinez does very well that can cause Nurmagomedov big problems, which is why the odds are inaccurate here and which is why there's value on Martinez. But understand the game we're playing. If you are going to roll the dice, take a gamble on a guy like Martinez this weekend, be prepared to lose your money, because if it was a super safe bet, the odds would be the other way round. So I just want to get that out there, because it is like a real trigger for me when someone makes fun of me for betting on like a good value underdog 3 fucking years ago that lost, and they still kind of like judge you for it. It's so silly, but that's the internet. The internet is a silly place. Let's get back to this fight. So Martinez Nurmagomedov. Why is this an interesting fight from a betting point of view? Why do I think the odds are off? Well, what's interesting about this matchup is that whenever you see the surname Nurmagomedov, we instantly think of Khabib. We instantly think of guys like Islam Makhachev or Umar Nurmagomedov, who are extremely strong MMA grapplers, and we think, you know, surely, Saeed Nurmagomedov is going to be bringing that same level of grappling to the table. But what's interesting about Saeed Nurmagomedov is, even though he's a decent grappler, he's nowhere near the level of those other guys that I just mentioned. And Saeed Nurmagomedov is different to those guys in the sense that he's actually a striker. His base is primarily striking. If you go back and watch all of his fights in the UFC, you'll see that he doesn't actually grapple anywhere near as much as he strikes. He prefers to stand and strike, to the extent that in his last fight against Romanov, he got absolutely dominated on the ground before hitting a Hail Mary submission. Romanov overwhelmed him with his grappling and just totally outgrappled Saeed Nurmagomedov for the majority of that fight, which is crazy when you think about it, because, you know, when have you ever seen Islam Makhachev or Umar Nurmagomedov or Khabib Nurmagomedov outgrappled? It never happens, right? So this is where I kind of highlight the point that I feel Nurmagomedov is being given extra kind of brownie points from the odds makers and the betting public, assuming he's a brilliant grappler like his stablemates, when actually he's a striker with kind of okay grappling. That's where I feel the stylistic matchup between these two, how they actually match up in reality, is not reflected in the odds. And I'm not saying Nurmagomedov shouldn't be the favourite here. What I am saying is the odds should be far closer to even money than they actually are. Because what we've seen from Nurmagomedov in his past fights, and I'll show you a little bit of footage to back this up in a moment, but Nurmagomedov is one of these guys that doesn't have the cardio to grapple hard for 3 rounds. So you're not going to see him go out there and put on a grappling clinic like a Khabib or like a Makhachev would. Instead, what Nurmagomedov does is he keeps fights standing and he tries to win a kickboxing match, and then he uses his grappling to either get himself out of trouble if he's under pressure or struggling or he's losing the fight on the feet, or to steal rounds. So you won't see a ton of grappling from Nurmagomedov. What you'll see is he may shoot like one takedown per round, but if he doesn't get that takedown, it's very rare he'll go back to it until the next round. So on the feet, what Nurmagomedov likes to do is either be all the way outside the range where he can be hit, or all the way on the inside, either working for takedowns, throwing spinning attacks, or lighting you up with big blitzing combinations. Nurmagomedov is one of these guys that is also not particularly technical. He throws a lot of spinning attacks, a lot of blitzing attacks, a lot of combinations, but there is kind of a sloppiness to how he throws his spinning attacks as well. He's not like an Edson Barboza that can load up a spinning attack and land it with pinpoint accuracy. He's a reasonably good striker, don't get me wrong. He is good defensively, he's difficult to get to, but it's not like he is going to be super technical on the feet, super difficult to get to, and be able to light you up. He doesn't move as well as like an Umar Nurmagomedov. He's not as technical as an Umar Nurmagomedov. He's a lot worse defensively as well. He's not as good at reading his opponents. So what we've got here between Martinez and Nurmagomedov is actually two strikers with very different styles of striking, but one of the strikers, in the case of Nurmagomedov, has a bit of grappling to go with it as well. And if you go back and watch like the last few fights from these two guys, what you'll notice stylistically is that if this fight stays standing, Martinez has got a pretty big advantage over Nurmagomedov. He throws a more diverse range of attacks, a higher volume of strikes, he's a lot better defensively, and he's a lot more dangerous on the feet as well. He lands the harder, nastier, more impactful strikes. If this matchup stays standing, I think Martinez is going to be able to outstrike Nurmagomedov. I think he'll do more damage. I think he'll be competitive. I think Nurmagomedov will hold his own because of how good defensively, how well he moves. But I do think Martinez has a decent sized edge on the feet. The question here is whether or not Nurmagomedov's grappling is going to be the difference between the two. Because if Martinez has a reasonably good advantage over Nurmagomedov on the feet, but Nurmagomedov can kind of hold his own on the feet, then grappling here might be the real difference. We know Martinez is not going to be able to out-grapple Nurmagomedov. Even though Nurmagomedov isn't at the level of some of his stablemates when it comes to grappling, he's still a much better grappler than Martinez. We've got to be realistic, right? Nurmagomedov is going to have the advantage when it comes to grappling. However, what Martinez has, based on past performances, is pretty good defensive wrestling and takedown defense. Now, the problem with that statement is that it's a bit inconclusive. So what we've seen from Martinez is very good takedown defense, a very good ability to work his way back up to his feet when he gets taken down. But we've only seen this in flashes. We haven't seen Martinez face a really strong wrestler who relentlessly tried to take him down. Right, the best example we've got is his fight against Dvalishvili. And we know Dvalishvili, very good offensive wrestler, shot some nice deep double leg takedowns on Martinez, worked hard to get the fight to the ground, didn't have any success. But Dvalishvili is not the level of grappler Nurmagomedov is. So where the gambling aspect of this bet comes in is that we've got to take a speculative risk on the fact that Martinez showing flashes of really good takedown defense and an ability to work his way back out to his feet in past fights against inferior grapplers to Nurmagomedov is going to give him a reasonably good chance of neutralizing the threat of Nurmagomedov's grappling in this fight. And that's inconclusive, right? We don't know if Nurmagomedov is just going to be that extra level up and he's going to be able to overwhelm Martinez with grappling. But the reason why I'm still comfortable taking the gamble on Martinez is because the risk to reward ratio that his odds give us. Because for me, if the fight stays standing, I'm very confident Martinez will outstrike Nurmagomedov pretty comfortably. And so the real question then over his grappling is, will Martinez be able to stuff Nurmagomedov's takedowns And if he gets taken down, will he be able to work his way back up to his feet quickly? Well, we don't know the answer to that question because Martinez hasn't faced a grappler at the level of Nurmagomedov. But what we have seen is Martinez pass the test of takedown defense with flying colours whenever his takedown defense has been tested over the last couple of years. Earlier in his UFC career, it was bad, but he's made big improvements in that area. So the way I look at this fight, and this is where I want to talk to you about how I calculate risk to reward percentages. And why when guys are like, oh, remember that bet you lost 3 years ago, you're a dum-dum. I'm like, mate, just fucking go away. Go away. You don't understand the game we're playing here. If we look at the odds on Jonathan Martinez, right, say average odds are about 3.05 plus 205 for an implied probability of 33%. So we know if the fight stays standing, Martinez is likely to do very well and win the fight. We know that Nurmagomedov may have a big advantage over Martinez when it comes to grappling, or he may not. So that's kind of 50-50, right? We know if Martinez can neutralise the threat of Nurmagomedov's grappling, he'll likely win. If he can't, he'll likely lose. So that's 50-50 to me. So for me, this fight hinges on whether Nurmagomedov can have success with his grappling. Based on past performances, we don't know whether he will or he will not. So in my eyes, this fight is far closer to being 50-50 than the 70-30 that these odds imply. So I look at a guy like Jonathan Martinez and I go, well, his odds are implying a 33% chance of winning. I think that's inaccurate because I think if he keeps the fight standing, he's got like a 60 to 70% chance of winning. And since it's 50-50 whether he will be able to keep the fight standing or not, because we just don't know, there's a really good margin of value in the odds here. Even if you only gave Martinez a 40% chance of winning, because you think there's a possibility Nurmagomedov could outstrike him, you're still getting a 7% margin over the bookie. So this is one of those situations where I don't know how this fight is going to play out, right? Nurmagomedov might take Martinez down and submit him with a guillotine in 40 seconds. That doesn't change the fact that based on everything we know leading into this fight, based on past performances, Martinez's odds are off and there's value here. And I want to show you a bit of footage to kind of highlight the fact that Nurmagomedov's grappling ain't as scary as people think it is. And this is why I say the only place that you will find truth and honesty in this game is in the fight footage. It's the reason why we're able to win bets on guys like Jamahal Hill when they fight Glover, because everyone's worried about Glover taking Jamahal Hill down, and we say, hey guys, it's nothing to worry about. Jamahal Hill's going to be just fine when it comes to grappling. We watched the footage showed us what is true. Jamahal Hill goes and gets the win. Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, we did the work, right? We looked at the past fights. We were like, hey, Tommy looks like a much better boxer than Jake Paul. Tommy's the underdog. It's a fucking no-brainer to bet to bet Tommy Fury. We bet Tommy, he gets a win, comes through for us. We're not always right, but a very high percentage of the time, we're on the side that makes the most sense based on past performances. We can't control what happens in the future. We don't have a crystal ball. But past performances do give us a very, very clear indication of what is most likely to happen in upcoming fights. And it doesn't always work out. But I do feel we consistently make very good decisions. So this is the third round of Said Nurmagomedov's recent fight against Douglas Silva de Andrade. And what I want to show you is just a few grappling exchanges here, just so you can see that Nurmagomedov doesn't have that same sort of crushing physicality to his grappling that his teammates do. So you can see Andrade gets in on a body lock here and just slams Nurmagomedov to the ground. Nurmagomedov immediately pops back up to his feet, but you can see straight away he's not giving off like Khabib Makhachev vibes in these positions. Now if we keep skipping through, in a moment, Nurmagomedov's going to get his own takedown here, right? So we're in the third round. He shoots a nice, well-timed double leg on Andrade that would be very, very difficult to stop. The timing on this single leg, drives in nice and deep on that single leg. and then works hard to upset the balance of Andrade, and he gets into Andrade's guard. So very good takedown, you know, very nice single leg takedown, but Andrade starts rolling for a leg to get enough space to get to his knees and pop back up to his feet. So straight away you can see Nurmagomedov, very much like Zubair Tukhugov, has the technique, he has the single leg entry, he has the chain wrestling, but he doesn't have that crushing physicality to go with it. So guys that are very good at working their way back up to their feet can get back up to their feet because he doesn't have that physicality, that heavy top game, that grappling control to hold them down. And now look at what happens. So midway through round 3, obviously Nurmagomedov's tired, but now there's nowhere near as much drive on his takedowns because he's just burnt through what energy he did have on the previous single leg. So when he shoots a double leg now, look at how high up above the legs, or look at how high up above the hips it is here. And you can see there's so much space in there for Andrade to get these underhooks and easily neutralize that takedown. And now look at how flat Nurmagomedov looks on the feet. He's throwing sloppy spinning back kicks. There's no hand speed. You know, he's a lot more flat-footed. Just a real sloppiness to his striking. And ends up going down there off a failed spinning back kick. And you can see from there on, he just kind of stays on his back, exhausted. Doesn't show any urgency to pop back up to his feet. We know that he found himself in this position with about 2.5 minutes left to go in round 3. And he just stayed there for 1.5 minutes until Herb finally stood him up. And then look towards the end of this round, just a real sloppiness and a flatness to everything that he does. Now you can imagine Jonathan Martinez, cardio machine, devastating leg kicks, great boxing. He's going to be lighting Nurmagomedov up late on in this fight if Nurmagomedov is this tired and sloppy. Imagine Jonathan Martinez in there with this guy, peppering his legs, landing huge boxing combinations. And you can see a really nice deep double leg takedown there. Because he's tired, he just can't generate anywhere near as much drive on it. So Andrade's got loads of time to get that underhook in play on the right side and stuff it. Like I say, this will not be an easy fight for Martinez this weekend. It will be a tough fight. Nurmagomedov's no joke. He's very good. Decent grappler. Reasonably good striker. However, I just think the odds are absolutely crazy to me. I don't understand why Nurmagomedov is such a big favourite. For me, this fight should be way closer to the even money odds range. So if Martinez can keep the fight standing or quickly work his way back up to his feet when he gets taken down, I think Nurmagomedov is going to be in a lot of trouble in this fight. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. It's a very, very interesting matchup, but these are the kind of bets I like because you don't have to win many of them to be profitable long term. You just wait for situations where, for whatever reason, the odds don't fully reflect reality. And then you can you can find situations like this where the odds are very wide. You're betting on a young hungry bull like Martinez, is very well rounded, making big improvements from fight to fight, and yeah, you could find really strong positions to get your money in, to hopefully profit long term. But do your own research because it's going to be a tough fight for both guys. What I would say is about the matchup, I'd be surprised if either guy dominated. I don't know if Martinez is going to win. I don't know if Nurmagomedov is going to win. But I'd be surprised if whoever wins has it easy. I would imagine it will be a very, very close competitive fight. And someone probably end up winning a split decision or like a really competitive matchup. So in terms of the over-under on this one, both these guys are very tough. Both of them are very difficult to put away. Both of them are very well-rounded. I think it is pretty likely this fight goes the distance. I probably won't be betting it, but if you do want to bet the over-under on this matchup, I would imagine this fight goes to a decision. In terms of prop bets on this fight, I do like Martinez by decision, and if we look at the odds on that, 4.70, 5.0, plus 370, plus 400 in that odds range. Martinez by decision, I quite like it. I think that is a decent prop, so I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the final fight on this main card, which is going to be Vitor Petrino making his UFC debut against Anton Turkalj, the Pleasure Man. Very interesting nickname. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that both guys are in that dead even money odds range, where if you shop around, you can bet both guys at odds of 1.91, which is going to be minus 110 for an implied probability of 52%. And once again, camera has gone out of focus, which is very annoying in this video and something I'm going to need to fix. So Vitor Petrino making his UFC debut. He's 25 years old, 6'2", with a 77.5-inch reach. Turkalj, 26 years old, 6'4", with a 78-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, and this is a very interesting fight. Looking forward to this one. Definitely a contrast in styles. So what you've got with Vitor Petrino is a very heavy-handed, very powerful, very explosive, very athletic, power puncher and reasonably skilled MMA grappler, but slows down as fights wear on because of how much he relies on his power and athleticism. And in Turkalj, you've got the complete opposite. He doesn't have the athleticism, the power, or the physicality of Petrino, but he's very industrious, very grindy, and can push a high pace and go hard for 3 rounds without slowing down. So you've got a really difference in contrasting styles here. So what Turkalj wants to do in this fight is spend the least amount of time in kickboxing range possible, because his striking defense is very, very bad. He's a knockout waiting to happen. Very easy to punch in the face, very easy to knock out. He's a sitting duck on the feet, which is a problem for him in this matchup, because Petrino has big power in his hands, true legit knockout power, and Petrino's also one of these guys that fully commits to everything that he does. So every single thing that he throws is to try and kill you. There's no range finding strikes with this guy. Everything he throws can put you away. And with how bad Turkalj is defensively and how aggressive Petrino is, when this fight is standing, Turkalj will be at constant risk of being knocked out. Petrino's very dangerous. So what Turkalj wants to do is close the distance, grab a hold of Petrino, drive him into the cage, and start wearing him down in the clinch. Start working for takedowns. Now, early on, this is not going to be an easy thing to do, because Petrino, his defensive wrestling, his grappling, his takedown defense, it's not bad. And Turkalj's offensive wrestling isn't that good. Turkalj is more of like a grinder that just, tries to wet blanket you for 3 rounds. So early on, I feel this fight is going to be difficult for Turkalj, because Petrino is going to be extremely dangerous on the feet. Petrino will for sure have the advantage when it comes to striking early on. And his grappling's at a place where he's probably going to neutralise the threat of Turkalj's grappling early. But as the fight wears on, as the fight goes deeper, it gets harder and harder for Petrino, because Turkalj is one of these guys that fights at a high pace and he won't stop coming. Turkalj will continue to come forward and look to break Petrino and just look to get him into the clinch and wear on him against the cage. So this is one of those matchups where the odds being in the even money odds range make a lot of sense to me, because Petrino is going to do very well early on and has a very good chance of knocking Turkalj out early on. But if Turkalj can kind of hang in there for 6 or 7 minutes, drag Petrino into deep waters, when Petrino starts to slow, it'll be far easier for Turkalj to drive him into the clinch, drive him into the cage, and start working for his takedowns and beat him up in the clinch. Similar kind of... this matchup is similar in many ways to the Julian Marquez versus Marc-Andre Barrio fight last weekend, where we knew that Barrio would be in a lot of trouble early because of how dangerous Marquez is, and we saw Marquez land a lot of big shots on Barrio early on, hurt Barrio a lot, inflict a lot of damage, but Barrio weathered that early storm, and then in the second round it was a lot easier for Barrio to grab a hold of Marquez, drive him into the cage and beat him up in the clinch. This is kind of the same fight. Petrino, just like Julian Marquez, is going to be able to cause Turkalj a lot of problems early on, but if Turkalj can just weather the early storm and hang in there like Barrio could, Turkalj's chances of winning go up exponentially. The real difference in this matchup, though, is that Turkalj is a lot worse defensively than Barrio. So the probability of Petrino knocking Turkalj out is higher than the probability of Marquez knocking Barrio out. So, you know, very difficult to feel confident on either one of these guys. I don't think either of them is a strong position. I think the odds are pretty much where they should be. I think the odds are accurate on this fight. For that reason, I'm going to pass. My lean would be Turkalj, simply because it's Petrino's UFC debut, and I just don't like the idea of betting on a guy that, you know, if he doesn't get the job done in the first 6 or 7 minutes of the fight, he's probably going to struggle very, very badly. So that's why my lean is Turkalj, but I can't bet Turkalj. I don't feel confident in Turkalj because I know early on Petrino can absolutely give him hell, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Petrino land a death shot and knock him out. So I hope you found that useful. Now, in terms of the over-under on this matchup, I do think it is very likely this fight ends inside the distance, because I see either Petrino getting an early knockout or Turkalj stopping him late on when he's too tired to defend himself. The odds are very steep, though. They reflect that being the most likely outcome. So for me, I wouldn't bet that you know, the odds are too steep for me. I would probably pass on that and avoid it. But I do think it's the most likely outcome. In terms of props, we want to be thinking about the most likely outcomes. Petrino to win by knockout or TKO, one of the most likely outcomes, but the odds are very, very bad on that. The odds are very steep, so I'd probably give that a miss. The other would be maybe to take Turkalj to get a late stoppage. We know Petrino slows down a lot, so what are the odds on Turkalj to win in round 3? Let's take a look. Do we even have odds on Turkalj to win in round 3? Yes, we do. Here it is. So yeah, Turkalj to win in round 3, 13.0 plus 1,200. I quite like that, because if Turkalj can just hang in there early, drag Petrino into deep waters, I think Petrino will be in a lot of trouble in round 3 when Turkalj really starts to pour it on and go for the kill. Especially if Turkalj is behind in the fight, maybe he's down 2 rounds and knows he needs a finish in round 3, he might really go for it, which increases the probability of a 3rd round finish for Turkalj. So I quite like that prop. So yes, I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if you got a lot of value out of these breakdown videos, please head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link in the description below. You'll find breakdowns for all the prelim fights on this card. Join the live betting group if that floats your boat. I think you'll enjoy that a lot. And until next time, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Hope you make loads of money this weekend. And I will see you all very soon. Nice one, guys. Bye.